Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 15 of my 2021 holiday card series. Today I'm going to be using the Gnome for the Holidays stamp set from Hello Bluebird. So I recently shared this card in a haul video. I showed you how it was similar to my day 2 version. I had actually used the same frame, just in the reverse that was left over from the day 2. And you guys unanimously voted for a video, so I have recreated that card for you guys. And I apologize about the lighting, but I had to film this at night. So I've stamped these images out with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers. So I'm going to start with my gnome's skin, and just for the sake of uniformity, I'm going to be coloring them all the same. I'm going to be doing their outfits the same as well. So I chose E000, E00, and E11 for that, which is my go-to Caucasian skin tone. So I added a little shadow up under the hat, and then also a little shadow on the side of the nose, and a teeny bit on the edge of the beard, so that would look nice and fluffy, so that would be protruding out. And then I also colored in the hands. The way that they're drawn, they can be either hands or mittens. When I did my day 8 holiday card series video, I did color them as mittens, but today I'm going to do them as hands just to make it a little bit different. So moving on to my second guy and doing those same shadows and laying those in with that E11, blending out with the E00, and then having a little bit of highlight on the lower half of the face with that E000. So I'm actually really glad that you guys voted for this to be turned into a video, because I just love these guys so much, and I really wanted to be able to share another card or video with you guys using them before, you know, the holidays are over, and then I'll have to wait a whole nother year before I can use them again. So I'm going to use E00, E11, and E13 to color in their noses, just so they're a little bit darker and have that contrast. Just helps them look extra protruding out, which I think makes them look super darling. Then I wanted to add in some rosy cheeks, so I pulled out my usual combo, which is R11 and R20. But I decided to start with the R11 this time, and I actually liked how soft that was. So I blended that out with the R000, and I didn't use the R20 at all. And I'm also going to do the same thing for the snowman. You can do it before or after you color them in. So since I had them out, I just went ahead and did that. And then for their beards, I didn't want to do gray, but I still wanted them to look kind of white or maybe like a really pale blonde. So I went with E50, E51, and E53. I started with the E51 because I wasn't sure how dark I wanted to go. So I used that and then blended out with the E50, and then I came in with that E53 and added just the barest touch of that in like the really nice little crevices there that are drawn, and then blended back out with the E51 and then the E50. And I really like how that worked out, because there wasn't that whole dark line of the E53 that was going to make it look a lot darker and more brown or blonde. It was just these little touches here and there, and I think that worked out well, and it gave it more dimension too. So I did the same on the other two guys, and I didn't blend all the way up to the top of the beard. I left the barest sliver of white space close to the face, which made it look even lighter. So it's really more of like a soft blonde look, which I think is really fun. You know, I think the gray beards are fine too, but it's fun to do something a little bit different every once in a while. So while I have these colors out, I'm also going to do the mushroom stems. I just used the E51 and the E50 like I did with the beards, and then went back in and added just a touch of that E53 in the top right corner and then blended back out. And then I realized that I forgot to color in their eyebrows and their ears. So I pulled my E00 and my E11 back out. I'm going to color the ears in with those. I just put a little E11 at the bottom and blended up with the E00 and filled in the eyebrows with the E53. My red combo is going to be my favorite Christmas red combo, which is R24, R29, and R39. And I'm going to do all three of the gnome's hats and the snowman's hat as well. So because these guys are all facing forward, I'm going to do my shadows on both the left and the right and put my highlight right down the center of those hats so they'll look really nice and round, and that center part that is protruding out the most will be really catching the light. So I laid in that R39 first and then blended out with the R29, which is such a nice deep rich shade, and then filled in with the R24. Now I will say that because I had to film this at night, the lighting was really hard for me to see like exactly where the lines were, so I had a little trouble getting that red inside a couple of their eyebrows. I did manage to get most of it out eventually. I did have to work back and forth with my colorless blender, and I did that off screen because this video was already getting long and I didn't want to take up too much time. But you can see right there, his right eyebrow has some red in it. And the guy on the left, his left eyebrow had just a touch of the red in it. So I was able to push it back. It took a few times. I had to let it dry completely in between. I would kind of go on to the next guy and then work back on the other guy, the other guy's eyebrow, and just keep pushing that color back, and eventually it did work. Reds are so hard to push away, but thankfully it was only like the barest amount that got in there. But I'm a perfectionist, I didn't want him to look like he had a bloody eyebrow, so I had to try my hardest to really push that color back. I also want to say that I did do a second layer of all of these hats off screen. I guess I got a little bit in the third guy as well. But yeah, I did a second layer off screen because these reds are super vibrant already, but once you throw that second coat on, they get so rich and gorgeous. It makes a huge difference. So definitely go over your Copics with a second layer. Make sure you're using a really good cardstock that is meant for Copic coloring, because that ink needs to saturate into the fibers of the paper in order to be able to blend well. So if you're going over with a second layer and your ink is bleeding out of the lines, you may need a different kind of paper. So another way to get rid of some bleed out is to go over it with a white gel pen, which you saw me do. I didn't want to do that over the eyebrows because I didn't want to color over the white gel pen, but I could use it for that area between the end of the hat because it was super tiny. So then I used the T1 to add some shading to the candy cane, and the T1 and T3 to add a little texture to the pom-poms on the ends of their hats. And then I went back to my red combo. I took away the R39 and added in the R22, and I'm going to use that to do the red stripes on my candy cane. And because that candy cane goes behind his back, I was able to make those stripes go the way that I wanted to. I like to have both ends red if possible, so that was really nice that I could do that. And then I also used these shades to color in the mushroom caps. So I did the shadow with the R29 right up underneath the snow because that would be casting a shadow because it's really piled on there. And I'm also going to do the little bow on that tiny wreath with these shades. So I blended out with the R24, and then I'm adding a nice highlight at the bottom left edge with that R22 and also on the tips and ends of that ribbon. And then I did one of the little ornaments that's hanging from the snowman's little twig arms with those shades as well. And then I'm moving on to some browns, and I chose E23, E24, and E27 for their pants, give them some little breeches. So I use that E27 to outline the outsides and also cast a little shadow where their shirts are overlapping, and then a little shadow on the inner part of their legs as well. And since those were super small, I just went ahead and did all three of them at once. And then I'm going to take that E25 and blend that out. The E27 is pretty dark, so I'm making sure to really scrub over the edge of the E27 with that E25 so I get a nice smooth blend. I don't want to have like harsh lines on the edges. And then I'll take the E23 and fill the rest of that in. Again, just doing those little circular scribbling motions to make everything nice and smooth. And then for their shoes, I didn't want to do something that was much outside the color palette that I had in mind, so I just darkened them a bit with the E29 in this combo and left off the E23. So I added a little shadow to the back of the shoe and then in the crease of where the toe meets the back of the shoe, and then blended that out with the E27. And I'm going to leave a little rounded space on the end of the toe for the highlight, and I'll fill that in with the E25. So their boots just really match nicely with the rest of their outfit rather than bringing in like a black or something that wasn't in this color palette. Next, I wanted to do my snowman, and normally I use BGs for snowmen. I normally reach for BG 10 and BG 11, but I'm going to be matching this to some pattern paper, and the blue tone that was in that pattern paper was really more blue than that blue-green. So I ended up going with B000 and B00 instead, and I really like how that turned out. So I'm going to use that for the little trees as well to make them look like they are completely covered in snow. So I added a bit of that B00 up at the top and then at the top edge of each of those sections, and then blended that out softly with that B000. And then I'll just leave the white cardstock for the highlight. I'm also going to do the snow drifts on top of the mushrooms with those same shades and leave the top edge white. And I did the glass in the lantern with those shades as well. Then I'm going to move on to my snowman's carrot nose, and I chose YR02, YR04, and YR07. So I put the darkest, the YR07 at the bottom, and the lightest at the top. And then I'm going back to my tees. I forgot to do the white brim of the snowman's hat. So I added just a little T3 on the outer edges, blended out with the T1, and then used the T0 to soften that into the white. And I grabbed my colorless blender to just help that along. And then I'm going to keep the T3 and add in the T5 and the T7 to do the lantern. So I guess I did have a black in this color palette, but I think it would have looked kind of funny to do that brown, and I wanted it to look like one of those old metallic lanterns. So I'm going to do the candle part with the R24 and the little flame with a Y15. And I'll do a little glow with the Y11. And then I used those two shades to do the star on top of the Christmas tree that gnome is holding. For their shirts, I wanted kind of like a yellow green, and I chose YG11, YG13, YG17, and then G46, because that YG17 just doesn't add enough depth in the shadows for me. So you could leave off the YG11 if you wanted to, but I just really love the way these four markers work together. I think you get a lot of contrast with this range of markers. So I use that G46 to lay in some shadows. I'm laying them on the outside edges of the body and then the underside of the sleeves, and then blending toward the center with the YG17, bringing that even farther with the YG13, and then using just a little bit of that YG11 for a nice highlight. And I really think it almost makes this combo glow, very similar to the red combo. I just feel like it has such a glow to it, which really reminds me of Christmas. So I'm going to continue on with the other two guys' sweaters. For this guy, because his arms are tucked behind his back, I only use the G46 to color in his sleeves, because you only see the barest bit of them and they are like further back on his body. But for the last gnome, I'm going to do them on the undersides of both sleeves again, and then on the sides of the body, just like on the first guy. So I'm going to finish up him, and then I'm going to switch up the greens for the last few items. I wanted the tree, especially because it's in his arm and really close to the other green. I didn't want the greens to be too similar at all. I wanted every little detail to stand out, because that's the reason I love this set so much. Not only are these gnomes just so adorable, but all of the details are super cute. Before I switch to that other green combo, though, I am also going to color in this little snowman's scarf, and this time I did start with the YG17 as the darkest because I want to add some detail over top of that. So you can totally see the difference between the three lightest colors on him and the colors that are on the gnome's sweater with that darkest added in for the shadows. It's a big difference. So my other green combo is going to be G03, G07, and G28. And these are definitely more blue-toned greens. So I think they really do add a nice bit of contrast against the yellow-green that I used for the sweaters. So I'm starting at the top of the tree with the darkest shade, the G28, blending down with the G07, and then filling in with the G03. There is quite a gap between especially the G07 and the G28, so I'm making sure to really scrub over the edge of the previous color so that I'm dragging a little bit of that darker color into the midtone, and then the same with the midtone into the lightest shade. So I did the Christmas tree, and I'm doing the little wreath, and then I'm also going to do the last little bauble that is hanging from the snowman's arms. And now that the snowman's scarf has dried, I'm going to go back in with that G46 and add some diagonal stripes, and then add some more diagonal stripes in the other direction to create a nice little plaid, just to give it some extra detail. Then I'll grab a black Sakura Jelly Roll marker, pen, whatever you want to call it, and I'm going to go over the eyes of all of these guys. This is an extra step that you don't necessarily have to do, but it really does make them nice and bright, and I think it just brings your images back to life. And then I'm going to trim them all out with their matching dies. The pattern paper that I'm using today is from the Simple Stories Make It Merry 6x8 pad. And I definitely wanted to use this plaid. That was kind of the inspiration for the color palette. And then I wanted to find the little trees that I want to use for the background, plus one other print to use in the frame because it is a two-part frame. So I'm just flipping through and trying to find something that I think looks really nice. I went back and forth between this red polka dot and a couple of the different ones, but in the end I decided to go with this red print that has little white berries on it. It almost looks like mistletoe. So that's the one that I'm going to end up using. So took me a while to decide because I wasn't sure that the reds were going to match, but I don't really have too many orangey red Copics, but I decided to go for it because in that background there is a darker red tone on tone, so I think it still all pulls together. Also in that plaid there is the kind of orangey red and the bluish red, so I think it all works. I die cut those with the Gallery Frame number 7, and then I'm going to pop out the inner window portion of both of those. And that actually creates two frames again, just like it did with my Day 2 card. So I have an extra frame that I can use on another project, and I wasn't quite sure yet which version I wanted to go with. So I decided to assemble both of them, and how I do that is I just flip them both over to the back side and make sure everything is lined up nice and straight. And then I grab some Scotch Magic Tape. It's just regular tape like you use to wrap gifts with. And I only need a thin strip, so I tear that strip in half, and then I can tape together two sides of that. So I'm going to just tape this whole thing together on all four sides. That way I can use that frame as one piece. So once I've done that, I also die cut some snowdrifts with the Slimline Hill and Dale dies from Hello Bluebird. You don't need the Slimline version, that's just the only one that I have, so that's what I used. And then I'm going to fit these little snowdrifts into the the bottom section and then the top section so that they go across both windows in that section. So I'm adding those in with some liquid glue. I had actually added all of my foam tape to the back of this and then realized I forgot to do the snowdrift. Luckily, I hadn't pressed that foam tape down too firmly, so I was able to peel that back up so that I could fit these in there because I wanted them to be popped up as well to give more dimension to the card. So I'm adding one in each, then just checking to make sure that I like that look. And then I want to add a second snowdrift in each of these so that there's like layers because it just adds more depth to the scene. So I'm going to add another one in the bottom and then I'll repeat that in the top, just kind of making sure that they're going in like a different direction so the rise and fall of those snowdrifts isn't exactly the same for both of those pieces in each part. Then I'll go and add my foam tape back in. I'm going to do the little crossbars as well to make sure that they are really well supported. And then I will also add a bunch of foam tape behind the snowdrifts too because I want everything to be super supported in case I decide to mail this one, although this could be one that I hand deliver because square cards are a bit more expensive to mail, although I did buy the correct stamps for those, so I'm ready to go if I decide to mail this one out. For my sentiment, I'm using the Merry Little Christmas stamp set from Hello Bluebird. It's got a ton of little sentiments that are really, really sweet in different fonts. That's the set right there. And I stamped that down with Lawn Fawn Noble Fur ink. And then I created a square card base. It's 5 1/4 by 5 1/4, which is the same as the Gallery Frame 7 die. I did that out of cilantro cardstock and then stamped another little gnome and another sentiment on the inside. So then I'm taking that tree pattern paper and I'm going to glue that down to the card front. I just trimmed it down to be 5 by 5 so it would fit nicely within the parameters of that card base. And then I'm going to peel off all that foam tape, the release papers from that. Like I said, I wanted that really well supported, so I did put a ton of it on there. But I'd rather have my cards go through the mail looking like I created them and not be kind of all pushed in and scrunched up and all of that. So I'm going to line that up with the edges of the card, just making sure that it is on there nice and straight, being super careful. And then once I'm happy with that, I will press that down into place. Then I'll bring in my images and I'm going to be adhering them down with a combination of foam tape and liquid glue. So I kind of laid them out in each square to see how I wanted them to go, and then added foam tape any place their bodies would be above the snowdrift. So anything below, I could just add liquid glue, and that way they'll be nice and level with the frame. So in this first little square, I'm going to add the gnome with the lantern, and then I'm going to tuck one of these snowy trees back behind him. I did adjust him just a little bit so I could fit that tree back in there a little bit better, but I let it overhang the frame just a bit. I think sometimes that makes your scene look a little bit more expansive and like it's continuing on beyond the confines of the little box that is the scene, you know? So I did the same with the second gnome with his tree that's hanging out just a little bit. And then I tucked one of the mushrooms in the lower snowdrift. And then in the bottom left corner, I'm going to add the snowman. And his foam tape, I didn't measure quite right, so I had to tear off just a little bit of that and then get him back on there. And I'm going to do the other mushroom because I didn't want the mushrooms to be right above each other. I think it looks so much more pleasing to the eye if they're like kitty corner from each other, and the same with the little snowy trees. So I'm going to add the gnome with the candy cane in the last little section, and then I'll add that snowy tree to the snowdrift on the inside edge. So everything is kind of mirrored and it's very nice and balanced, which I love. And then I'm going to take that tiny little wreath and add that into the hand of the gnome in the top left corner. I die cut the sentiment with one of the Lawn Fawn Everyday sentiment banners. It's the skinniest one. And then I added that to the cross section of that little window frame. And then I wanted to add a little bit of Stardust stickles, of course. So I'm going to do a little bit of sparkle on the snowy trees and also to the light of the lantern and the little pom-poms on each of their hats. I also did the star on the tree and the snow on the mushrooms and the little ornaments. So then I wanted to add a little color to that snow, so I went back to my B00 marker, which I used for the snowman, and the snow on the trees and the mushrooms. And I'm just doing a little line at the top edge of each of those snowdrifts to give them a bit more definition. And then I'll grab the B000 and just blend out the edge of that. It's just a very subtle little detail, but I think it really did add a nice bit of definition to the card. I also wanted to add in some snow, so I grabbed my Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, made sure to shake that up really good, and then I'm going to use a little stylus to dot that in all over both the background and my images. I want some of that snow to fall in front of them so that they really look like they are in that scene and not just that the snow is falling behind them. So I'm going to dot it here and there wherever I think it will look good. I try to avoid the face. I don't really want to have snow obscuring any of their adorable little features, but everywhere else I will just add a little dot here and there. And I make sure to add a few dots before I dip back into the pot so I get a nice variety of sizes as well. If you don't have this bleed-proof white, you can also just use a white gel pen, although sometimes the gel pens have a little bit of a harder time covering up the dark colors, especially red. But some of them do work just fine, so either of those options would be good. So that is going to complete this card. I'm going to lift that up to the camera so you can see all of the detail. That snow is also a little bit raised, which gives it some texture. There's another peek at the inside, and then I'll bring in the other card that I created so you can see the differences between the two. I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button. Make sure that you're subscribed and that you've rung that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. If you're interested in any of these products, you'll find the links down below in the description bar. And if you'd like to check out day 15 of the previous 2 years of Holiday Card Series, I'll have them on screen right here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.